Stem cells is going to change the world. It's going to change healthcare. It's going to change how we conduct modern medicine, and it's going to change the way we think about life.
Mattias Bernow is the CEO of Cellcolabs, which is making high-quality stem cells accessible to all. He's on a mission to industrialize regenerative medicine and unlock its full potential at scale.
This is not the fountain of youth. We will not live forever. We won't become 200 years old. I believe that stem cells will mainly increase our health. So in healthcare, there's a before and after antibiotics. And what Professor Martin said is there's going to be a before and after stem cells. There's a chance for us to alleviate some of this burden, maybe cure some of these diseases. But for me as a physician, what I think is even more interesting is
the future looks amazing, but also a little scary. If you, just like me, want to have an honest outlook of what the next chapter could look like and how best to prepare for that, I ask for one simple favour. Subscribe, so I can invite the brightest minds on this podcast and get those answers for both you and I. Enjoy the episode. Why should someone want to learn about stem cells?
because stem cells is going to change the world. It's going to change healthcare. It's going to change how we conduct modern medicine, and it's going to change the way we think about life. To set the scene on stem cells, I often bring smarter people into the room. So I often quote former dean at the Harvard School of Medicine, Professor Joseph Martin, who said that stem cell therapies have the potential to do for chronic diseases what antibiotics did for infectious diseases. And if you think about what he really said, 80 years ago, before the discovery of penicillin, you could cut your hand and die from blood poisoning. Children, older frail people, even people like us, midlife, could die from a simple infection. As physicians, we did surgery, but many of our patients died from wound infections. So in healthcare, there's a before and after antibiotics. And what Professor Martin said is there's going to be a before and after stem cells. Because if we died from infections 80 years ago, today we die from chronic diseases. Heart infarctions, strokes, Alzheimer's, dementia, diabetes, and we suffer from life-impairing diseases such as arthritis and other signs of aging. And what Professor Martin said is with the breakthrough of stem cell therapies, there's a chance for us to alleviate some of this disease burden, maybe cure some of these diseases. But for me as a physician, what I think is even more interesting is the possibility to prevent those diseases, thereby expanding, hopefully, our healthy lifespan. And this is why they become interesting for regenerative medicine, longevity, and why every person alive should know about this and think about this and learn more.
You come from a family of physicians.
I do.
And you're from Sweden. I assume the trodden path wasn't to go down something as, let's say, niche at the moment as stem cells. Why did you feel called to come into this space?
I would like to say that I was seeking a mission and then I ventured my way into stem cells, but that is not often the way great stories actually go. I come from a family of doctors, and they truly advised me not to pursue the path of becoming a physician in Sweden. If you look at work quality, pay, and everything around being a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor. He was a sole provider of the family, and he had a nice apartment and a summer house. And my parents, they needed to be two doctors to be able to afford the same life setting, though they worked even harder, really tough. And they were seeing the way it was going in Sweden, that you work more, you get paid less, it's tougher, you're going to get squeezed. In Sweden, you're also employed by the public sector. That's a very small private sector. So you're it's a monopoly almost. So they said, do anything but becoming a doctor. So I tried to do that, and I started at business school here in Stockholm. It was amazing. I loved it from day one. But in the early 2000s, everybody was going to London to become bankers. That was not the future I foresaw for myself. So I pivoted and went against the advice of my parents and started at Karolinska to become a physician. I loved it from day one. I understood I want to become a doctor. But I missed the extrovert and entrepreneurial students at Stockholm School of Economics. So I studied med school at Karolinska. I hung out with the extrovert entrepreneurial kids at Stockholm School of Economics, and in some kind of manic episode, I ended up with double degrees. That was never my plan, but it's been a great stroke of luck for me, because I've been moving in between those two worlds ever since. I've spent 7 years as a clinical physician, mostly in the ER, doing emergency medicine at Karolinska University Hospital. I've done some years in family medicine in both Sweden and Norway. And I spent some time at Boston Consulting Group as a management consultant, obviously working with healthcare. And 10 years ago, I kind of found my way home with one foot in each, being an entrepreneur in healthcare. Co-founded a digital platform for physical care providers to meet their patients with telemedicine. And 4 years ago now, I was recruited to be the CEO of Cellcolabs due to my background. And it was when they asked me, they said, "Well, we're gonna make stem cells available for everyone. They're the next big thing in medicine." Being a physician, I thought, well, I should know about the next big thing in medicine. Why don't I? I know what a stem cell is. I went to med school, and the thing is that with the field of stem cells and mesenchymal stem cells in particularly, there's not enough published in the books that you read. You need to dive into the scientific published papers, and most doctors and people don't have time to do that, or the ability to read that kind of complicated literature. So I needed to do a deep dive in that, and what I found was amazing. And it was almost too good to be true. So having the management consultant background, I did my D-Day on the field, and I understood this may very well be the next big thing.
Was it stem cells at large, or was it the technology being developed at Cellco?
Both. The mesenchymal stem cells at large, we can come back to them, but they're really a solution looking for a problem. And then the fantastic world-leading science behind Cellcolabs coming out of Karolinska, and one of the world-leading professors, having spent 25 years spearheading the field. And then the production technology and the vision and mission to democratize the access to these kind of stem cells by large-scale production, making them available, thereby accelerating research so that we learn more who should use them, how often, and what doses, and who should maybe not use them, if so. And then, of course, also with the fantastic ambition to make them available and affordable, because, to be honest, they're quite expensive, as all new inventions. But with time, price decreases, and we're pushing that as well. So what looked too good to be true, I'm 4 years into it, and it's still true, and it's an amazing journey.
So I want you to describe stem cells to me as if I'm a 5-year-old. What are the benefits of it? And also with mesenchymal stem cells, what's the difference between your trophoblast stem cells and just stem cells that might be being used in market right now?
Yes. So 5-year-old, daddy meets mom, there's love, hopefully, and a sperm meets an egg, and there's a fetus. And those are the original stem cells that are omnipotent and can become anything. They then turn into fetus, turns into a baby. During being a baby in our entire life, we have a reservoir of stem cells who can grow out and build new tissue all through life. And when we're young, we have a lot of them. When we're older, they get a bit more tired and we have fewer, but we actually have them all life. And we have different kinds of stem cells who can be specialized in different ways and can develop into different things. The mesenchymal stem cells is a certain type of stem cell that you can find in most tissues of the body. They've been known for 40 years. They've been very well researched over the past 25-30 years, and there is now a general consensus. And this is why Cellcolabs dove into this, because our research background from Karolinska and Professor LeBlanc, her working with those cells at the very early stage when they were not very well known. There were a couple of hundred publications on stem cells, and the field didn't know how they worked or what they should be used for. And Professor Bernow is a hematologist, so a blood doctor working with blood cancer patients, when the cure is often a bone marrow transplant to change the immune system to get rid of the blood cancer, and the bone marrow is the production of the blood. So when that fails, there's a complication called graft versus host, a rejection reaction. The bone marrow is trying to throw out the body. And then Professor Bernow, late 90s, understood that the MSCs, maybe they can be used to treat the GVHD. And she was very successful in showing that and saving the lives of 50% of the terminally ill people. She was published in Lancet in 2004 and 2008. And then the field suddenly just exploded, going from a couple of hundred publications to there are now closer to 100,000 publications mentioning mesenchymal stem cells. So the research has been accelerated over the past 20 years. And there is now consensus on different things because there is so much published information. And there are the cells do many things, and they do things that we still do not understand. But there are three overarching things that they do. They are anti-inflammatory. Inflammation is being suppressed. So, and as you know, inflammation is a main driver behind chronic diseases, behind aging, and also several types of cancer.
Yeah.
And on top of being anti-inflammatory, suppressing inflammation, they're also regenerative and can help heal damaged tissue. So normally, when you get an injury, the injured tissue is mainly replaced by fibrosis or scarring tissue. The older you are, the more scarring tissue, the less functional tissue. But with the stem cells, they help the body. They don't turn into the new tissue, the MSCs, but the MSCs, they help your body using its old healing abilities to regenerate with functional tissue instead of scarring tissue. So anti-inflammatory, regenerative, and immunomodulatory, meaning that they can help boost or reset the immune system if it goes rogue. And for these three functions, the cells are interesting in almost any field of medicine. If you look at the ongoing clinical trials globally, there are between 400 and 600 ongoing trials, and you can throw a dart at a hospital organogram. Whatever clinic you hit, there's an ongoing trial. If you look at the big 5 or 10 big killers of the world, they are being used in some way for all of them. They cannot cure cancer, let's check that off, but they can be used for people with cancer and with the problems that you have after undergoing chemotherapy and so on. The main issues that were there as ongoing science today and where there's being used, cardiovascular disease is a very big thing where published science show significantly decreased risks for myocardial infarctions or stroke. Arthritis, the fourth biggest disease burden, resulting in people not being able to work or having lots of pains and not being able to move. They show truly interesting results, both in terms of managing pain, but also some trials now showing improved cartilage structure or increased cartilage, which is amazing because for an arthritis patient, the next step is often prosthetic surgery. You have the neurodegenerative diseases where they show interesting early results when it comes to Alzheimer's, published just a few weeks ago. And then you have the effects on blood sugar control in diabetes. You have the inflammatory bowel diseases and other immune diseases with inflammation. The list is long. And then, of course, you have all of the preventative, coming back to regenerative medicine and longevity and escaping the velocity of aging. And then, of course, you have the entire industry of aesthetics and beauty. So,
what is preventing then the space from being in the mainstream right now? Because clearly the benefits are there from what you're saying. Why am I not going down the road right now?
I would say there are 2 or 3 main bottlenecks that has held the field back for 15 years at least. I would say the largest bottleneck right now is all the charlatans out there claiming to produce stem cells and deliver stem cells that are subpar when it comes to quality, both in terms of safety and efficacy.
Because we've had a few accidents, right?
Every year there are accidents with people who are less informed and then go for treatments somewhere where it's just not safe. Because coming back, this is important, sorry for interrupting, but this is super important. When you look at the published science and you look at bone marrow-derived mesenchymal stem cells produced according to GMP. GMP is key here, so we'll get back to that. There are no known severe adverse events or severe risks known using stem cells. But the key here is bone marrow derived, which is the safest source. You can, as you know, use umbilical cord, adipose, fatty tissue, or placental tissue, and bone marrow. Those are the 4 big sources. There are some others, but those are 4 big. When you use bone marrow and you produce them according to the highest quality, which is called GMP.
GMP, which stands for
good manufacturing practice.
yeah.
Good manufacturing practice. Yeah. That is the highest, but also the only quality level for use of any medication in humans, whether it is paracetamol, hormones, chemo, or stem cell therapy, or anything else. Whatever prescribed drug you've ever received from a doctor, from a pharmacy, has been produced according to GMP, and that is of course super important also for stem cells.
Yeah.
They and stem cells, they are, or they should be, alive, highest quality, and of course sterile before you get them, whether you get them injected locally or you get them IV. And when you go offshore, because there are only a few registered products, so most people who want to get the treatments go offshore outside US or Europe, it is super important to make sure that the provider is GMP certified. The producer should be GMP certified, and then of course it should be used by a responsible doctor. And if you go offshore, preferably within a clinical trial, because that is a regulated setting where checks and balances are up to par.
It's funny, I'm a big advocate of chiropractors and osteos, right? Which is sometimes described as like pseudoscience, but I've seen the huge benefits of being in the space. But again, you get charlatans that come into the space and you hear of 1 or 2 accidents, and then all of a sudden I hate calling it the mainstream, but there is a certain portion of the population that just want to latch on to that 1 or 2 accidents. And we had it with cell and gene therapy back in the 2000s, right? Just 1 or 2 deaths caused the whole space to pause for, a decade or 2. And so it's so important as an ecosystem that you kind of try and raise the standards, raise the bar, and make sure that those charlatans, as you say, don't have that space to, affect it for everyone, because the benefits are 100% there.
Absolutely. And going back to what I said earlier, the knowledge about mesenchymal stem cells and their fantastic abilities, it is not in the books yet. And most of us doctors, we don't have time to read it. There's so much being published on every kind of topic that we stay at whatever we're focused on. We don't have time to get updated on everything else. Yeah. And when you then hear about the accidents, as a doctor, your main responsibility is not to injure your patient. Don't do harm. Help if possible. Cure when if it's at all possible. Yeah. So when we hear about problems, we become very conservative. Yeah. So that is, the charlatanery is one of the bottlenecks. Then of course the regulatory framework has been one of them. If you go back 15 years ago, MSCs were quite widely allowed, and they could be used at the doctor's discretion because it was considered transplantation. Often you needed an IRBs or an ethical approval, but then you could do the treatments using donor cells, which is the most interesting thing. And we'll get back to donor cells versus using your own cells, because that's important. So it was widely used, but then it was a bit overused, so it was regulated, and then regulated as a chemical drug component, really, under a framework called ATMP, Advanced Therapeutic Medicinal Product, and that has not been the optimal way to regulate living stem cells with the cost and the complexity. So that has held back a lot of the research that is now coming up again. But we're now in a fantastic position, so it has taken 15 extra years. We have had to redo some of the research due to the frameworks. But now I think there's roughly 10 approved mesenchymal stem cell therapies that are approved around the world. We saw the first one for GVHD for children in the US was approved in December 24, so last year. And there's one now that has a conditional approval in China as well. And things are coming up, and you see therapies in phase 2 or phase 3 trials on cardiovascular disease, on Alzheimer, on back pain, on arthritis, on inflammatory bowel disease, and many others. So we're at the verge of a breakthrough. So the Charlatans, the regulatory framework, and the cost. And the cost is also sadly something that is driving people to the Charlatans, because the cost of producing stem cells, according to the frameworks, which are mainly good, keeping all the producers that are compliant, and not only compliant, but certified according to GMP, honest, and making sure that the cells are at the highest quality. And that comes at a cost. To give you a funny or interesting background maybe on Cellcolabs and the reason why we exist, Professor Bernow, hematologist by training, showed that the cells could be used for GVHD and save 50% of the terminally ill patients. In Sweden, a professor is not funded to run a medicinal product all the way through a phase 3 and a registered product. It costs too much. So instead, after showing that it was a very good alternative for GVHD patients, she tried it on MS, diabetes, toxic organ failure, chronic hoarseness, and then fast forwarding her career into the 2020 and when the pandemic hit, and people were dying like flies on intensive care due to the COVID and the white lung syndrome, not being able to breathe, multi-organ failure, and so on. She hypothesized really early in 2020 that maybe the cells could help the immune system that goes rogue with the COVID. It's a virus, and of course the virus is dangerous, but the real danger is when the immune system goes berserk due to the virus, and that is why people die. Maybe the cells could be used for the severely ill COVID patients as well. And she was approved by the Swedish FDA to treat a small amount of people, and was highly successful in doing so. Ran into one problem though. She ran out of cells. So one of the world leading professors of mesenchymal stem cells ran out of cells. Nor her group, nor Karolinska University Hospital, who's one of the biggest university hospitals in the northern part of Europe, was able to produce enough cells in a short time. And that is when Professor Bernow said, enough is enough. I'm the world leading authority of this. When even I can have enough cells, there's a problem in the world. So she donated her life work of science to the founders of Cellcolabs, saying that if you set up a company to do large-scale production of mesenchymal stem cells at the highest standard, to make them available and affordable, I'm supporting that. And that is why Cellcolabs was founded in early 2021. And we've now done the tech transfer from both Professor Bernow and the Karolinska producing the cells for Professor Bernow. We've built the facility at Karolinska Business Park. We've scaled up after the tech transfer. We scaled up by more than 100 times. We validated the process. We applied to the Swedish FDA, and we received the approvals to do GMP production of the cells. And now we're selling the cells to 9 countries on 4 continents. I think it's maybe 10 countries, but it's a growing number of countries on 4 continents. And we have university hospitals here in Europe, medtech companies, biotech companies, research groups, clinics, and we receive a lot of interest. And initially we were seeking the researchers out. And now, due to our global footprint and expansion, we have FDAs coming to us and saying, well, we've seen that you've made the MSCs available in different markets. How can we do this? We're stuck in the ATMP framework. What is a responsible way of moving forward? How can we increase and accelerate the research? And how should we change? Because there is a major macro change going on right now, where if the cells were initially considered transplant and then pivoted into the ATMP framework and not being very available at all, following the Nobel Prize of 2012 for Japan, or the Yamanaka factor and the iPS cells, Japan understood that. So we're leading the field on this, but it's too expensive to commercialize. What can we do? They changed their regulatory framework for doing research, particularly when it comes to phase 3, the big trials, the expensive trials, and making them easier to fund through governmental funding or insurance funding. Pretty much saying, if you do a phase 1 or 2 trial and you show that the cells are safe and there's a good hypo that they are effective as well, then you get the conditional approval. So you get to sell the cells within the clinical trial, thereby financing your trial. And that was a very big success for Japan. So Japan and Korea led the field for a while. And now there's a global macro trend towards making the cells more and more available, where countries are opening up, looking at the safety profile of MSCs and saying, how can we make them more available in a responsible way? Yeah. And now I think the US is about to take over the lead in this, where they on a state level are opening up to making MSCs more available and allowed to use on different indications if they are GMP produced and handled in a safe way. So,
gotcha.
There are several interesting factors happening at the same time. And another thing is that normally science and medical breakthroughs are driven by the profession and the professors and the haphazardous something in a lab. Alexander Fleming forgetting the petri dish and then growing mold that became penicillin.
Yeah.
This time it's driven to some extent, at least, by the patients, the people who say that, well, I have heart infarctions or I have Alzheimer. When can this become available? Then you have the longevity enthusiasts and the regenerative medicine and people trying to escape aging, so that are now driving this as well. So there are several interesting things happening at the same time in this amazing field of MSCs.
Brilliant. Okay, so we are at this, let's call it a Cambrian explosion of stem cells and stem cell research going on, but there's a lot of differences in stem cells, right? You've got autologous and allogeneic, you've got intravenous, you've got, you talk about bone marrow and different parts of the body. Can you just explain to, again, a 5-year-old what are the differences?
So let's start with the difficult words, autologous versus allogeneic.
Yeah.
Autologous is when you take cells from yourself and give them back to yourself. That is allowed in Europe, in US, and most other places if you don't manipulate them or farm them in any way. So describing it in a mean way would be like withdrawing money from your bank account and then putting it back again. Though you don't put it in the same place. So when you do autologous cells, it is often for if you have a local problem, for example. So you take some from your bone marrow, from your fat, and then you put them in a knee that is hurting from arthritis. And that has been shown by science also to be beneficial. Autologous. Allogeneic is when you get donor cells. So you take them from a donor. And when you do allogeneic donor cells, you take a small amount of whatever tissue where you find the stem cells, you extract the stem cells from that tissue, and then you grow them in a lab so that they divide a couple of times. And that has many, many upsides. First of all, what is published in scientific literature is that the optimal donor, so whether it's for yourself or it's autologous or allogeneic for someone else, the optimal donor is between 18 and 30 and in full health. And most people having a problem with the knee or some other kind of health issue is not between 18 and 30 in full health. So the allogeneic cells are most often more efficacious. So that is one thing. Then it's a dose question. If you take out your own cells and you're not allowed to manipulate them or have them grow, you get a certain amount of cells. Yeah. Maybe you get 100,000, maybe 500,000 or even 1 million. But when you do a local injection in a knee, you should have between 25 and 50 million local injection. So versus systemic or IV, which is when you get them in the bloodstream, then the global standard dose would be 100 million cells.
So as in when you say local, you're having the injection, and this is from someone who's 18 to 30, right? Okay, and for, let's say, a Brian Johnson type or myself, like how many would I need to, let's say, then re-inject into my knees? Would it just be one dose per, or would it, like how explain to me how much you'd need to...
To do one injection locally, you would need roughly 50 million cells. And to do an IV, so systemic blood IV infusion, would be 100 million cells, would be the advised dose. So then the question that you also asked, how often should I do this? And that depends on the reason for doing it. If you have a knee problem, or if you have a heart problem, or if you have intestinal bowel disease, or whatever it may be. And this is a easy question that is very difficult to answer. So it depends on the age of the patient, of the disease, the complexity of the disease, and maybe to let you down right away, it's not a one-time treatment and then you will live forever. Just let's be clear about this. This is not the fountain of youth. We will not live forever. We won't become 200 years old. The upside of mesenchymal stem cells that I'm hoping for, and where the science is going, is that hopefully it can cure, alleviate, or even prevent some of the major killers of today. So what modern medicine has done over the past 30 years, it has extended our lifetime, but not the golden years between 30 and 50 or 55. It has extended our lifetime between 65 and 95, maybe, when we're not in full health. And the hope for stem cells is to be able to prolong our healthy lifespan. Maybe we're able to become 110 or 120 years old. Nobody really knows. And of course, if we can extend our lifetime forever using gene therapy and other things, that is a different question. But I believe that stem cells will mainly increase our healthy lifespan. So
with Cellco, I think it's 18 to 30-year-olds in Sweden, right? It's mainly like that's your sample size, right? And so I've got Mediterranean and Middle Eastern heritage. Would it be fine for me to receive stem cells from a white European? So it's not that it's not similar to like blood types or anything like that. Anyone could have stem cells from your portion of Swedes.
Yes.
Okay.
When it comes to the optimal donor, it's a person in full health between 18 and 30.
Okay.
Where they come from, what they look is sex is not important according to the current knowledge by published science. So anyone can use these cells if they are, depending on the indication and why you want to use them. So there's no difference when it comes to that.
And how much would it set me back today if I were to go to the Bahamas, which is one of your main centers, right?
We're running clinical trials in the Bahamas, where we run 2 trials, one on musculoskeletal disease and injuries, and one on cardiovascular disease prevention, where you can start whether you have established heart disease or any other term of kind of disease except for cancer, seeing if it can help and benefit you as a person. And once again, it goes back to where are you on your personal health journey. Are you 45 and in full health and want to decrease the inflammation levels to break or decrease aging, or are you 85, suffered 3 heart infarction and you don't want to die from the 4th? That's the main things on what can you expect and how often should you do it. And once again, it doesn't stop the clock, so it's not a one-off. If you want to really get the full benefit of stem cell treatment, you should probably go on a recurrent treatment, depending on age and your health status. Maybe once a year, maybe every 2 or 3 years. But that is when you should go and speak to educated people or clinical advisors and learn more. And we can always give you advice on a personal level to help that. And I just wanted to say also that if you only do one time, is it wasted money? Absolutely not. And this is where also stem cell treatment differentiates from many other things, because the 5 things that you should do, and you should do every day, and that is for free, by the way. You should sleep right, you should have friends, you should eat right, you should exercise, and you should avoid doing drugs, alcohol and nicotine, and that's for free. And then you can do peptides and infrared sauna and cold plunges and intermittent fasting and yoga. The thing is that those things you need to do every day. And if it's a supplement or medication, you need to get right in the treatment dose interval. The thing with stem cells or mesenchymal stem cells, it's if you look at published science, if you do one treatment, they tend to benefit you over 6 to 18 or maybe even up to 30 months, giving one treatment. And that is one of the main upsides compared to many other interventions, whether it is for a disease or for you just wanting to maintain your health.
I'm 33 and my knees are just shot. I had 2 operations on my left knee. Of something happened with my right after I did like a 10K in Riyadh recently. And I don't really know where to start. Like I see different practitioners and all that, but I'm yet to, you talk about level 1 being the 5 things you should do well. I've been so focused on doing those well that I haven't even started to think about, peptides and stem cells. What would you advise for me to do? If I, let's say, had a budget of $3,000 to spend on recovering my knees in the next year.
For $3,000, I would visit a high-end doctor. I would probably run an MRI to understand what is the problem in your knee, if it's local inflammation or if there's injury.
Yeah.
And so number 1 is always understand the indication, understand the disease, see what it is, and then get proper treatment. And of course, for most knees, independent of what it is, physiotherapy is good. Rest may sometimes be good if it's inflammation. There could be anti-inflammatory medications or treatments, and then I would look at biologics as the next step. But now we're getting out of the price range. Autologous.
Okay, I'm giving you. I've just won the lottery. Okay, I want better knees. I'm 33. I want to have knees of an 18-year-old.
Then it's an easy choice. Find a doctor who's well versed. Learn. Once again, it's always number 1. Find out about the indication and what is your problem. Based on that, I would definitely go look at stem cells and see what they can do, because this is one of the most published areas where good cells in good trials show significant effects on pain. And if it's mild to moderate injury or arthritis, in some cases, you can see regrowth of cartilage and improved bone structure as well. So that would definitely be my way to go about it.
Okay, brilliant. I had Aaron D'Souza from the Enhanced Games on the podcast recently, and I was asking him, like, what can we expect in 2026 during the first Enhanced Games? Can we expect people that are getting injected with peptides every day? And he said, actually, we're still some way from peptides being used, even in the Enhanced Games, which is pretty much let's say the trailblazer in kind of making human enhancement supplements and therapeutics more part of the mainstream. You talk about the bottlenecks. At what point do you think it's going to be as easy as injecting a peptide into my knees for stem cells? Is it going to be something that I could expect to do in London or in Austin in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, or do you think it's going to take longer?
You will be able to do it in Europe within a regulatory framework within 2 years, I think. It's still going to be under a trial umbrella, but where you will be able to commercially be able to pay to get the treatment if you agree to being part of the trial and learning more about it. Commercially available outside clinical trials, so more as a registered product. Hard to say, but this is where we see the macro trend also for regulatory frameworks being more allowing towards mesenchymal stem cell use.
Yeah.
We see that now in the US. We know that Europe tends to be a bit behind. So within 5 to 10 years, I think it will be both more commercially available with a change for a regulatory framework, but also commercially available from registered products. And to be honest, it is commercially available already around the world in several different places. The important thing is going back to GMP. If there's one thing I want your listeners to take away from today's podcast, it is GMP. Good manufacturing practice. That is the highest and only quality level. I think it's sad when people go for treatment and they don't get the effect that I want, but it's truly sad, or for both the individual and for the entire field, when people get hurt. So the best way to have safe cells is make sure that the provider is not only GMP compliant, but GMP certified. Ask for the certification. If they cannot show it, don't go there. If you ask for that, it is already commercially available around the world. It is more expensive, but if you pay a lower price, you pay with risk, and you may hurt yourself and you hurt the entire field. So the world-leading athletes, they're already using this.
Yeah.
Some speak about it openly, some don't. But when you're a professional athlete, you use your body as your tool, and you get injured and you get torn, and the degrees of inflammation from playing several games every week, it's insane. So people go for mesenchymal stem cell treatments around the world where they know it can be used, and especially if they have injuries, it's being used quite a lot due to the anti-inflammatory effect, which is the first way to help the body heal, and then for the regenerative effect, increasing the velocity of healing and healing with functional tissue over scarring tissue.
So if I go to a GMP facility, is there any risk that my body would reject the stem cells itself?
The short answer is no. The slightly more complicated answer is nobody can ever say for sure. But if you look at the cells, and if you dive deep into the immune system, everybody knows that if you receive blood, you need to match blood types.
Yeah.
If you receive a donor kidney, you need to match genetically. And when you match genetically, you look at your genetic profile. And there are a thing called HLA, human leukocyte antigen, that is on the outside of every cell, saying that those cells come from Mattias, or those cells come from someone else, recognizing that. So there's the reason for matching. The mesenchymal stem cells, they don't express those HLA on the surface. So that is why
HLA,
we can take
sorry?
HLA.
HLN, which is?
HLA, human leukocyte antigen. So human white blood cell antigen.
Gotcha.
And that is why we can take your cells and give them to me, and they will be accepted. And you almost being 30, you could be an optimal donor if you're in full health.
And will I become 1% Swede if I get the injection with Swedish stem cells?
You may get blue-eyed, and hard to say. No, you won't. And this is the beauty, and this is one of the things that we're very proud about at Cellcolabs, being based on more than 25 years of science by now, is that Professor LeBlanc, she has done the bench work, she has done the animal studies, the first in man, the phase 1 and 2, and now phase 3 trials. And then as part of this life work of science, she has also done autopsy trials on those terminal ill patients who received MSC treatment but did not survive. And there was no DNA from the donor to be found in the receiver. And this is also, we know this, but it's been shown now also by science. And we know this about how the cells work, because if you think about the most common route of treatment is IV treatment, so intravenous treatment. When a patient receives the cells go around in the blood system for 2 to 10 days, and then end up in the lungs, which is a very good place to be, because in the lungs, the entire blood passes on its way around your system. And thereby, the cells can listen to the signals in your blood, learning about what is wrong, where is their inflammation, where's their injury, how is the immune system doing. And listening to those signals, the stem cells, the mesenchymal stem cells, signal back using your own body's functions to decrease the inflammation, to start regeneration of damaged tissue, and to boost or reset the immune system if it has gone rogue. And after 2 to 10 days, the mesenchymal stem cells in the lungs are being eaten by the macrophages, the small Pac-Mans of the immune system, and thereby also exerting a very important effect. So not only through the signaling, but by being eaten by the immune system, they skew the immune system from being inflammatory to being anti-inflammatory. And thereby we know that the cells, and this is a huge misunderstanding globally, also for physicians and professors, the cells do not engraft. I repeat, the cells do not engraft. If you inject them in the knee, they don't turn into cartilage. They exert their anti-inflammatory effect, thereby helping your own chondrocytes, the cartilage cells, to start growing. And then they also further the regeneration, so they help them grow even faster. And that is how they work. The cells do not engraft.
So it's not just localized. So if I'm getting them injected into the knee, I would likely see benefits in my slightly injured shoulder as well, right?
We can employ you now. This is fantastic. Knowing this, you know more than most people around the world on stem cells. It is actually so that if you have arthritis of both knees and you inject one knee, you're going to see the most or best effect in that knee, but you're also going to see effect in the other knee.
Okay.
So that is how the cells work. And that is why in many cases you can give them IV and they're going to have a systemic or local effect where needed. The cells are smart. They listen to the signals in your body, and then they exert their effect where they are needed. I actually learned about the Finnish data, an orthopedic surgeon who has collected 15 years of data on patients with arthritis of the knees, where they were 4 different outcomes. Either stem cells in one knee, stem cells in 2 knees, or prosthetic surgery of one knee or prosthetic surgery of 2 knees. And the long-term outcome when it comes to functionality and pain is roughly the same. But what this orthopedic surgeon did was sets it apart is looked at survival, where there was best survival in those who got stem cells. And I think I don't know, it's not published yet, so to date, to me, it's still anecdotal, but I believe it, and I believe it to be true for 2 reasons. One thing is that we know that independent of where I inject the stem cells, they're going to give a systemic effect anyway due to their mode of action, listening to the signals and signaling back to your body. So they're going to give the regenerative and preventative effects in other parts of your body as well, especially for the cardiovascular system. But second, undergoing surgery takes a toll on your lifespan and the whatever health points you do have. And undergoing 2 surgeries, it's a big thing. Even if it's controlled surgery, it's trauma for your body, and that is once again expressing the upside of doing stem cells and preventative treatment rather than going into surgery and a kind of quick fix.
Yeah, in 2013, I went under general anesthesia 3 times. I had a huge laceration in my knee, so 2 major knee operations, and then I had a tonsillectomy at the end of the year. And I said to myself that year, never again. I will do everything I can to not go under general anesthetic. And I don't realize, I don't know now the impact it had on my gut health and all that, but yeah, it's quite extreme, I would say.
And once again, you're young and healthy. Imagine people who are 55 or 75 who needs to undergo surgery. The immense upside of being able to do any kind of treatment that can push the need for surgery is going to change the world.
So we know about Brian Johnson. He is one of your clients, and I'm sure you have a lot of well-known athletes in the US that are coming through the Cellco doors in the Bahamas. What did Brian Johnson get when he came to the facility? And what improvements did he see in his bodily functions and his midnight erections and all that?
Well, first of all, the only reason why I can say something about Brian Johnson is that he has been open about what he's done. He's published it in social media. So what I can say is pretty much what is already openly available. What we're running in the Bahamas is a clinical trial, and it comes at strict confidence. And yes, you're right. We have professional athletes from around the world making use of the stem cells and thereby supporting the research and accelerating that, for which we are very grateful. And Brian Johnson, he's a very well-known person, and he does amazing work in terms of making complicated facts available and for the general public. He's an educator of the world, which is amazing. He has a great team of doctors behind him. It's also well known that he spends $2 million per year on his doctors, and they had been looking for 2 years for mesenchymal stem cell treatment, but they hadn't found anyone that was up to par scientifically or quality-wise with GMP, good manufacturing practice. And they found us through Karolinska and Professor LeBlanc and said, well, this is a treatment we want to try. And it has been treated twice by us, one IV treatment in 23, receiving 100 million cells, and then again local injections in joints in 2024. And as a CEO of a stem cell company, you love Brian Johnson coming in through the doors, but it's also the worst kind of patient because he's doing so many great things for his body at the same time that his overall inflammatory levels are so low. So the question is, can our stem cells improve him even further? But to my knowledge, he has seen benefits from the treatments, and from what I know about the cells, as I said previously, they don't stop the clock on aging, but they, to what I believe, they definitely halt it for a bit, bringing down the inflammatory levels. So Brian has most likely had that effect as well, even though he had a very low starting point.
It must be difficult to like figure out how much value your treatment is giving to him, because he's trying so many different types of modalities all at the same time. I think for someone like an athlete is probably the best example, because they're injured, which is one thing. So there's clearly a lot of inflammation in that moment. So you can actually see in time the difference. Like, is there so for example, have you been able to test, like, let's say there's an anterior cruciate injury, I think that's the way you describe it, right? Which can leave an athlete out of a sport for 12 months. Have you been able to test or prove like the reduction in that recovery period?
As a company being based on 25 years of world-leading science, I try to avoid anecdotal stories, and we're running the trials, and we've published the first safety reports, and we will publish data in time to where we can talk about results. That is the scientific approach. What we're asking for is anecdotal data from which you can draw no certain conclusions. With that in mind, of course, we see interesting results in people being able to get back to sports earlier. They cut the regenerative time by 50%.
Wow.
Some of them, not all of them, and with Brian, it's the same as for everyone else. Inflammation is not a one-off. You don't take one pill, you don't take one stem cell injection, and then it stops. With aging and time, it increases. From 30 years old and onwards, inflammation increases. And you can look at the person and see how old they are, which is very much comparable to their inflammatory levels driving their aging. And it's a continuous work that you need to do. Upside of stem cells is you don't need to do them every morning or every day or every week. With MSCs, probably once a year is a good thing if you can afford it and if it's safe for you. But doing it every third or fifth year is probably also going to affect you in a positive way.
What I love about your style is that you are being very intentional about how you evolve the MSC space. And I know that there are probably a lot of people in similar spaces, or the space itself, that will be grabbing at this snake oil and saying, this is the solution and you must try it and it will give you endless benefits. But I think it's sometimes the difference between some of the European scientists I speak to and scientists from other parts of the world, that there is more intentionality, but also just understanding that all it takes is for one high profile mistake and it's going to set the space back quite a bit. So
yes, that's what I live and breathe for, is to make the mesenchymal stem cells available. It's my line of work, but it's also my passion and my hobby, and the reason why I travel 50% of the time, leaving wife and 2 kids at home and seeing them over FaceTime as much as I see them in person. And my worst enemy are the charlatans around the world, and therefore I meet professors, I meet interested end users, doctors, investors, and education or educating them is probably one of my main missions, because the more educated people are, the better decisions they will make, and that will be good for the entire industry. And that is one of the many reasons why I love Brian and him using himself as the guinea pig and educating the public on what works and what does not work. It's super important that people are informed. That is the first step to improving your health.
With these advanced therapeutics, when I think about human flourishing for all, let's say in 3 to 5 years, the key thing is making these solutions, these therapeutics, accessible, equitable. I want to start going into your crystal ball. In 2030, what percentage of the population will have access to MSC, to stem cells?
Say 2035, it would be 10 years from now. Then I hope that the price of an MSC treatment is cut by 80% or more. Then we're at the cost of roughly $5,000.
Yeah.
Then the global middle class would be able to afford it out of pocket. Also, you will have a lot of registered products, so it will be also reimbursed by insurance or the public funding. But you asked about 2030. We will be parts on down that road, and it's hard to say. But given what we see on a macro level and the regulatory frameworks, at least 20-25%, maybe more.
It's fascinating what is going to accelerate this process. Brian is a trailblazer.
Yep.
But also Brian, and I respect what Brian has been able to do because he's moved the needle. I feel like wearables have had their moment. I've got my Whoop on right now, and having people like Cristiano Ronaldo being like massive flag bearers for the wearable brands and for Whoop has taken the space quite a bit further. How important is it to get more mainstream flag bearers who are going to shout out about what you're doing? Is that what do you think is going to be the inflection point where someone like myself says, no, I'm going to do this because it's far better than me suffering and going to a physio for 6 months or whatever? Do you see an inflection point soon?
I think we are at the inflection point. We're seeing now healthcare being driven by the patients, not accepting subpar care. With the internet was a big thing, and now we have AI. People get educated, and they get educated fast, and they increase their demands, and they have a higher expectancy of quality and results when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah.
So we're at the inflection point right now. The 2 or 3 missing parts is the regulatory framework, the availability, and they're obviously very well connected, and then the price point. And we're seeing shifts in all these 3.
You talked before about this is just a Healthspan play. I've spoken to a few other stem cell companies that actually see this as a, something that could be more radical as well. Are you being too conservative and saying it's just a Healthspan play, or could this actually extend life by 10, 15, 20 years?
I am trying to be responsible CEO of a pharma company, so I what we see in science, I believe it will be a health span play. But if you think about what that really means, if you delay the onset of chronic diseases from 55 to 75 or 95, fewer people are going to die from a heart infarction at 60. And of course, we're going to see overall increased lifespans as well.
On that note, though, okay, so the US, let's talk about the US. Huge market, ballooning healthcare costs as well. At what point do you think there'll be a conversation between insurers, healthcare providers, people like yourself to say, hey, if we start this with patients at 45, 50, we are going to reduce healthcare bills by X, Y. When do you think those conversations start?
They are ongoing already. When there are approved registered products, they will come at a price point which is quite high. They will be used. They will be reimbursed. And at that same time point, the insurance companies are going to go look for where are their generics, what can we use instead, and even though it's not a registered product, what is the cost effectiveness of this? What's the health economics analysis of this? And that, together with the more allowing frameworks for the use of MSCs, is going to drive this. We're speaking to FDAs of the world and governmental officials and congressmen of the US and members of parliament in the UK, asking us, what does science say? How can it be used? Because as you mentioned, the healthcare costs of the world they're shooting through the roof. They're taking up. Previously it was 10% of the GNP. Now it's closer to 15% in some countries. It costs a lot, and that is why we need to push the health span, keeping people healthy, being able to work, instead of only the lifespan where they're sick, diseased, and it costs a lot and life quality is not as nice.
It's a much easier low-hanging fruit and something. I'm surprised you say members of parliament. I'm pretty excited that someone in parliament is thinking forwardly about these sort of therapeutics. Often we're kind of definitely third, fourth, or 100th mover.
People working with healthcare budgets, they're not sleeping very well. They see them exploding and they don't know how to finance them, and they're looking for, and I love this about our publicly elected officials, that they're facing a problem and they're trying to do their best and finding solutions, and they're now looking at this field.
Mattias, one of the biggest issues I find in the longevity space is it's becoming more public what someone can do, right? From a basic level. But when you start getting into these advanced therapeutics, a lot of people don't know where to start, to the point that I had Brian Kennedy, one of the top longevity scientists, who opened up the podcast, the first episode. And I asked him, like, where do you start with peptides? There are so many peptides in the market. And even he said, I only know a third of them. So with stem cells, like, where can someone start? Like, I know you've said about GMP, but is there a rule book to say, I have X disease, I believe that I have the risk of having early onset of X, Y, or Z, I should do stem cells at this age? Is there a rule book? For example, as a 33-year-old, I know that in the next 5-10 years, medicine is going to move so much. Like the goalposts are going to change so much.
Yep.
People talk about longevity, escape velocity. I probably am not going to take a risk with something that is really, really out there. I'm not saying stem cells is it, but I'm probably not going to take a risk. I'm going to wait for it to be validated. For someone else, it might be quite different. So who do you recommend stem cells for? And if someone was interested, where should they start?
Find a provider that is working with GMP, good manufacturing practice approved stem cells, who is also a good clinician or a doctor where you get sound advice. Find somebody who's not trying to sell you a treatment, but who is asking, what is your condition? What do you want to achieve? This is what the published science says. This is what you can expect. This is also what we don't know. And then with that information, you can make a decision. You can get a recommendation, and then you can go with it or go against it. That is the rule book. GMP first, good clinician. And that is the two most important things. That is how we operate. If anyone who's approaching us saying that Cellcolabs, we see that you're manufacturing top quality stem cells, we want to get treated. Well, okay, then we recommend that you do it within a clinical trial. Those are our clinics or trials working with us. Speak to their advisors. Tell them everything about your personal story, where you are. They will examine you and do whatever tests that they need to do to give you sound advice of what you can expect and not expect, and then make a decision based on that. If it's somebody who says, come here, pay, and go away, don't go there. It's a full stop.
As a physician, though, are there specific diseases that you would say to a family member, like, I really want you to come and get injected with MSCs because there is such clear validation. It might be anecdotal, but that one should. Heart disease or Alzheimer's, or I know you say cancer, less so, but
from a scientific perspective, I would say cardiovascular disease, both myocardial infarctions and strokes. And there's very good published data on arthritis and joint pain. There's also very good data on intestinal bowel disease, Crohn's disease. It's fantastic data. When it comes to Alzheimer, it is still quite early, but the anecdotal data for Alzheimer is through the roof.
Is there a perfect time? Is it before onset, or is it just as effective if one is in the midst of?
For me as a physician, the perfect timing is before onset. When I worked across the street at Karolinska University Hospital and in the emergency room, one of the standard patients I met was a male 55 first heart infarction. General okay health, but some risk factors. And obviously when I met them there, it was a survivor of a heart infarction. We could take care of them at least. And then day two, they're like kind of, oh, okay, I made it. I had 55 good years. Now I'm a cardiac patient. I'm like, no. Didn't happen yesterday evening. It happened over the past 10, 15 years. That is when your arteries clogged up from inflammation and fats and sleeping too little and drinking or eating too much and smoking and not exercising. This may have been prevented if you changed your life 5, 10, 15 years ago. And the same way with stem cell treatments, most likely, given the effects of being anti-inflammatory, regenerative, and immunomodulatory, if we change before disease occurs, when it's building up, but before it has struck, that is when you want to treat. Then being a bit more humble, understanding that it's quite costly, it's hard to say when should I start. Nobody can say on a personal level. On a population level, most likely before. But we know from the inflammatory levels and the risk of developing chronic diseases that before 40, not much happens. From 14 onwards, the inflammatory levels goes up, and that is when it's good to start preventing the general inflammation. And then, of course, once you develop different diseases, and we have different genetics, we're more or less prone to develop those diseases. Once you have them established, if you haven't started before, that is a great time to start.
Just quickly, like actually as an 18 or 20, 25-year-old, there's no point in getting injected with someone else's. No, it's just...
If you're in decent health, no. Of course, if you have a family disease or a genetic problem or whatever it may be, and you're struck by and it could be such a simple disease that it's not simple, sorry. It could be a common disease such as Crohn's with inflammatory bowel disease. Even if you're 18 or 30, it's life impairing, and it can be controlled, but not for everyone. And this is where mesenchymal stem cells, I believe, within the next 5 years will be a registered product. And if you look at the ongoing trials right now, not ours, but other companies using very similar bone marrow derived mesenchymal stem cells produced according to GMP, those patients are being put into remission, and they can step off several of their drugs controlling the disease. And to date, those that are being put into remission, it's not known when they will relapse. So maybe going forward, this could be a cure, but nobody knows. And this is why we need to accelerate the research. We need to treat more patients, learn more, and also make it available and affordable.
I feel like you talked about this inflection point. We're definitely at one now, but there's going to be a much larger inflection point when it becomes accessible both geographically and also cost-wise. Can you imagine it being as easy as going to a GP to get stem cells in 2035 or before?
Yes, I do. That is my dream, but also what I truly believe in. When you go in at least 10 years from now, when you go for your yearly checkup and you get the prescriptions that you need, maybe you get a flu shot if you still need that by then, you will also get the stem cell boost, 100 million IV, saying that, okay, great, see you next year, stay young and healthy.
IV rather than local?
Yes, IV. If you need it local, you'll get it local, and then you get an IV top-up as well. For us, if you have a knee problem, for example, so that the cells actually stay in the knee, take care of the knee, and don't take care of everything else in the body. So IV for sure, local if need be.
Just to finish off with some advice. If someone was looking to get into this space or learn more about stem cells, where should they look? And if someone was looking at potentially trying MSC because they were scared about early onset of something or onset of something, what should they do?
Being a CEO of Cellcolabs, visit cellcolabsclinical.com or cellcolabs.com. We answer every question that we do get. We have clinical advisors who ask the questions and get the information that we need to know, and answer every question that you may have, and then give advice based on science. And you don't need to come and get treated with our cells, whether it's within our clinical trials or with our clinical partners or elsewhere in the world, but you will get information, you will learn more what is safe, because safety is key. GMP, good manufacturing practice, wherever you go, whether with us or with someone else, make sure that the cells are produced according to GMP. Make sure that you have a good doctor. So we're a good place to start. If you go elsewhere, follow the rule book. Find a GMP provider, find a good doctor, look at what is your indication and understand that. And of course, optimize the easy things you can do. Sleep right. Have your friends. It's actually the second most important thing, having a social setting. Sleep right, have your friends, eat right, exercise right, and avoid alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs. And once you're optimized, find a good provider. We'd be happy to answer anything. And then if you're through that process, you know more than most doctors around the world, and then you can make an informed decision.
A final question. What is the most profound example of recovery or evolution that you've seen from a patient as a result of being injected with MSCs?
Wow, first of all, it's a question I don't want to answer because it may seem like I'm saying that the cells would do this for everyone, and they don't. But I get emails every week from people being treated with cells, improving their health in different ways. For me, as the CEO of a pharma company, we document that within our clinical trials. Others document them within their clinical trials, and once they're published, people can claim that happens. Looking at anecdotal stories, you should never draw any conclusions from that. But of course, there are fantastic effects on cardiovascular disease, on Alzheimer, on sexual health, on people with Crohn's disease being put into remission and can decrease their amounts of drugs that they need to use. So there are amazing examples. And of course, arthritis, people being able to go back to work and run or continue their professional athlete careers. There are many amazing anecdotal examples. That is why it's so important to run the trials, to be able to publish the collected data and draw certain conclusions.
One last thing about sexual health, because I know that's been mentioned quite a few times. Like, is that rate of erections or just ability to go at it for a bit longer, or like what are the anecdotal bits of information that
this is its own rabbit hole, but
I'm happy to dive into that rabbit hole.
There's for sexual health, the cells seem to be beneficial. There's not enough published yet, but if you look at the rigidity of the penis during erection, it needs to be rigid for the person to do intercourse. And there are published trials showing that it goes from 1.5, which is non-rigid, to 3.5, passing the 3 mark, which is the holy grail, because then it becomes rigid enough to have penetration. So it seems amazing, though it lasts for 6 to 12 months, and then you need to do another treatment. That is why people go around and inject their penises with stem cells around the world. And when they do, please do GMP cells. But one thing is the ability. But then, of course, you have the systematic effect of an MSC treatment, because if you are sick, you're less likely to engage in sexual activity. If you feel better, you're more likely to engage. Then there is, which we haven't talked that much about, the mental effects of MSCs treatment. And there is a well-known, it's called mental clarity, where people tend to be more focused, having less brain fog, and also being happier, because the MSCs, they bring down the inflammatory levels in the body. And mental health comes mostly from the brain, part of your body. And if you bring down the inflammatory pressure towards the brain, you decrease the degradation of serotonin and dopamine and other nice stuff. So you chemically become happier. Once again, more likely to engage in sexual activity. So if you're healthier, happier, and you have better dynamics of your sexual organs, whether it's female or male, you should see the graphic emails I get every week. It's great, and I'm happy to help with that. Though long term, we're aiming for the big ones: the cardiovascular disease, the arthritis, the musculoskeletal. But there's a lot of interest in sexual health as well, which is an important part of life.
So fascinating. For me personally, like I thought it was just physical, but when you start talking about the mental clarity, not anecdotal, I'm talking, I'm excited to see the studies come out in the future, but the possibility of improved mental clarity and sexual health, I think that really gets to the mainstream in a way that, you know, the physical elements, sure, but that's more of someone in, you know, usually someone post 50, right? Mattias, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a real education for me on stem cells, on MSC, on Cellcolabs, and the future of where stem cells will be in the next 5-10 years.
Thank you, Julian, for having me. It's been an honor and pleasure to be here and speak to you.
If you want to know what tomorrow has in store like I do, you definitely want to listen to our recent episode where I talked to Peter Diamandis about a future where we could live forever. Thank you so much.